Hey everyone, this is Jay Stein, and this is the Intelligent Investor Chart of the Week on the Devy Royale YouTube channel, where every week we look at a different KTC chart and talk about whether your favorite Dynasty assets are buy, sell, or holds. And today we're going to talk about why I think for win now teams, Cooper Kupp is a Dynasty buy in fantasy football. Let's get to work. Hey again, welcome back. So my process is about looking at KTC versus fantasy points per game and sort of coming up with a value for that. What we're doing in this series, we're sort of looking at the past KTC charts and what that could tell us about the future KTC prices for this player. And today we're going to look at Cooper Kupp. Again, KTC is KeepTradeCut. It's a website that uses crowdsourcing by having the people that visit the site answer whether they keep, trade, or cut certain players. Then they have an algorithm that figures out what the values of all those players would be. It's basically a sentiment indicator. For my purposes, what I use them as is like dollars. So what I'm trying to do is create more KTC or create more dollars for you in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So that's sort of how I think about it. Here is Cooper Kupp's KTC chart. Now we got all the way from 2019-ish, middle of 2019, all the way to where he is currently now. And let's take a look at this chart. So the blue solid line, that is Cooper Kupp's KTC price. You can see it starts around 6,500 in 2019. It goes up and down all the way through this chart. The red dashed line, that horizontal line that goes through the center of the chart, that is his average KTC over this time span. The blue dashed lines on either side of the red dashed lines, those horizontal lines, those are plus or minus one standard deviation for this series. And the gist there is nearly 70% of all the observations we see in the series should fall within those two blue dashed lines. So anytime you're getting close to one of those, you'd expect it to sort of bounce off and go back to the average-ish on the KTC price. And then this red solid line, that is the 150-day moving average. It's basically the past 150 days of his KTC prices. So it basically smooths out the line. And when those red and blue lines intersect, those give me ideas of when I should be buying and selling of Cooper Kupp. The purple bands that I have through these charts, those are the fantasy football seasons. That's week 1 through 18. It does not include the playoffs. Not everybody's playing the playoffs. So this is just your fantasy football seasons, week 1 through 18. So I have those in there so you can kind of see where his KTC moves through the season and then outside the season. So right now on KTC, Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 15. What I'm saying is I want to do a buy for a win now team because I think his price got a little bit too cheap. And I'm going to talk to you about why. So this is not for every squad. This is a win now move, not a rebuilding move. Cooper Kupp is 29 years old. So this is a short-term buy. You kind of buy him and you kind of you get what you can ride it out here. You take the points. Hopefully he helps you get a couple of fantasy championships and you ride it out. So, what are we talking about here? So from a fantasy points per game perspective, in 2021, he had one of the best seasons ever. That was a crazy year. He put up 26 fantasy points per game. And then you can actually, looking back at this chart, this is the second purple band. You can see sort of that appreciation that you see in KTC when he has that incredible year here. Then in 2022 football season, he goes and puts up 22 fantasy points per game. Now I'm looking at these from fantasy points per game. So actually Cooper Kupp did go down in the middle of the season. It was mid-November. He ended up having surgery on he had a high ankle sprain. He ended up having surgery on November 16th. The recovery was estimated to be about 6 weeks, but given the Rams season this year and how they weren't sort of in playoff contention, he was basically shut down for the season. And so I do think he'll be completely ready. Hopefully he'll be 100% this offseason and ready to go for next season. But he did get injured in that season, so that in 2022, those fantasy points per game that he put up of 22 fantasy points per game wasn't a full season perspective, but he's still putting up that differentiated wide receiver production, the differentiated production that can help you win fantasy championships. His target share, believe it or not, in 2021 was around 32%, which was wide receiver 1 on a per game basis. And then in 2022, it went down to 31.2%. So that actually was good enough for wide receiver 2 on a per game basis. And so, even the target share, the big knock against him going into this last season was there's no way he would be able to keep up that pace of target share. And in 2022, he's having similar target share the next year. So, overall, a differentiated wide receiver guy. So from a valuation perspective, again, I look at KTC divided by fantasy points per game divided by 10 to give me a PE ratio. And then I come up with a valuation by comparing that PE ratio to people that are of a similar age and for fantasy points projection. So the cluster that he is in 29 years and older and 20 plus fantasy points per game cluster. And the people in that cluster, the players in that cluster are Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and of course, Cooper Kupp. And so, looking at those players, I go through, I figure out like their KTC versus their fantasy points per game, which ones look like a little bit of a value, and then assign price targets. So my price target for Cooper Kupp is around 5,400 KTC to 5,600 KTC, which if you go back to this chart and you look at that middle red horizontal line, the average KTC, that is around 5,600. So I'm basically calling for him to get somewhere close to that red line, if not a little bit below that red line, which is actually 10 to 15-ish% upside from where he's currently trading at around 4,900. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about how to think about his price, where it could be, and how I think it goes from here. There's a lot of question marks, his age, what's going on with the Rams offense, the injury. I think he's sort of being a little bit left for dead when in actuality, he puts up differentiated fantasy points per game and can help you win your championship. So, how do we put this to work? How do we capitalize on this? Well, in win now mode, the main purpose here is we're earn fantasy points per game. So we're not going to be buying and holding him and expecting extreme appreciation that we'll be able to flip. I'm thinking 10 to 15% appreciation because he's healthy and he plays next year, and he helps you win your fantasy championship. But let's talk about some trades that can happen. So within his cluster, the trade that might actually work the best here is if you sold Tyreek Hill for Cooper Kupp plus. If you put it in KTC, the way that they tell you, it would be about a third. So you get Cooper Kupp plus a third equals Tyreek Hill. Now, I can understand because of the Tyreek Hill situation, maybe he's in a better situation, that maybe you want to hold on to Tyreek Hill. That's not our only option. There's lots of options to do, but that's just an interesting idea for these like 29 plus guys that score 20 fantasy points per game. Like that is an easy trade where you're trading down a curve, this sort of this compounding effect where you're trading down the price curve, but you're keeping the same, if not more, fantasy points per game, and you get to collect that extra third along the way. And believe it or not, Tyreek Hill is 29 years old too. The other ones that I have in here, so guys I trade straight up for Cooper Kupp, I trade Daniel Jones straight up for Cooper Kupp, Jamison Williams, Austin Eckler is an interesting one as he approaches the running back age cliff. I feel like there's a little bit more or potential sticking power or staying power with holding Cooper Kupp through the performance, and you're definitely getting that differentiated wide receiver performance with Cooper Kupp. And then maybe a little bit surprising about where his valuation has gotten to, but TJ Hawkinson is one that I trade straight up for Cooper Kupp if I'm in that win now mode. And then from a pick perspective, KTC has him valued around a 1.07 which I think is about right. I might try if I could get a little bit later than that. Maybe like the 109, 110, like late first range, but I can understand the 107. I can even make an argument for all the way up to the 104 if you're really in that win now mode and you need the fantasy points, and this will put you over the edge. But I'm not going above the two QBs, Young and Stroud, or Bijan. So that's kind of where I maybe draw the line as to that. But if you're going strictly by KTC, they're saying 1.07. I think that's probably about right. That's after guys like JSN and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's it. I think Cooper Kupp is that short-term win now sort of buy. You hold him and you score a lot of fantasy points, and hopefully he wins you a championship or two for you next 2 years. Thanks again so much for watching. Let me know in the comments who you want to see next week, or if there's somebody that you want, or something else that you want to talk about. We've talked about a few different types of things. So please like, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're not already, please join up in the Devy Royale Patreon. It's an awesome Patreon. A lot of smart guys in there, and you'll learn a lot if you join in there. You can find my work, my Intelligent Investor series on the Dynasty Nerds. There's no paywall. Feel free to go grab there. If you do have any questions, you can reach me on Twitter at _Jason Stein. Again, that's at _Jason Stein. And thank you so much for watching. See you again next week.